So before talking about RISC-V, let me talk about our Falcon processor. This is a processor we started the design of in 2005, and I'm showing here the earliest slide that I could find in my slide decks. That was like January 2006, and it kind of shows what we use the Falcon processor for. And I'll give a little bit of a history, because even before Falcon there was something else. We actually, this was our second attempt of using a programmable microcontroller as the control engine for our video engines. Before using the Falcon, this was done by just state machines, and hardware state machines in earlier versions. Then we replaced it by a tensilica processor at that time, and we ran into some troubles with that tensilica processor, not because the processor itself had any problems, but it just didn't fit in our flow. It had different interfaces, it used a different flow, the C models were not like accurate at the interface levels the way that we wanted it, and we had troubles with the licensing server, even though we actually got a free license from Tensilica, so it wasn't anything to do with money, but we still had to get a license, and you know, our IT just didn't work out, right? So tons and tons of trouble. So we switched to our own design, and we never looked back, because we've been very happy with it since then, and that shows over here. So looking at a little bit more of the history, we have it now in more than 15 designs, and every generation we add some new units that use a Falcon processor, and at this moment it's very established in NVIDIA. Everybody that says, hey, I have this controller that's a little bit more complex than I actually thought, I want to do it programmable, they immediately come to Falcon. And so I just did a kind of an estimation of how many of Falcons we actually shipped over the years. I looked at how many DGPUs shipped per year, right? I just got that from the internet, because I'm not giving away any kind of NVIDIA secrets here. So if I put this not on here, Jensen's gonna kill me, saying, hey, you're giving away our trade secrets, but no, that's not it. Just from the internet. We've been shipping Falcon for 10 years now. If I look at the number of Falcons inside every GPU, it's about 10. I said we have 15 engines right now. Not every engine goes into every design, and also in the earlier years we shipped less Falcons than we do right now, so it's actually been going up. But say 10 a year, and we have 60%, say roughly, of the market share over the 10 years. Right now I think we're more like 70, but over the years. So if you add it up, that's like 3 billion Falcons that we have shipped. We have never had any big problems with it, so it's been a real successful design for us. So replacing that was not a simple decision, right? So one of the reasons why I'm telling this is because this is not a toy project for us, right? It's important. Toys are important too. But if we do this wrong, right, we'll be in big trouble, right? So it's every chip that NVIDIA sells has a lot of these Falcons in it. They basically are kind of the housekeeping for the whole chip, right? It's one of the big things that they do, right? So the GPU, the graphics engine can be perfect, right? But if you can't keep your housekeeping done, the chip won't work. So it was a big decision to replace it. Why did we even think about replacing it? Well, our software engineers got a little bit unhappy with us over the years. It's been going on for a long time, of course. This wasn't a one-shot thing. But as you could see from the first example, right, it was a very simple, just setting some registers in the design, right? It was a very simple function. Over the years, more and more things got on there. So it's now not just a single engine anymore that we control. We basically control the whole chip, right? There's a lot of things that happen in the chip. We're connected, some of these Falcons, to sensors all over the chip. And so the software got more and more complex. We have operating systems running on it for a long time. Now we are getting actually a lot of requests for putting external software, so software we didn't develop ourselves on the Falcons. For example, many chips these days have like security processor, so do we. The security software stacks are coming from other companies and they just have to run. Shredded software, obviously, memory system, the memory, virtual memory, 64 bits, right, is kind of a requirement. And you know, we had a small processor that was just used for setting a few registers, and it kind of outlived its original design by a lot. But we were ready for something new. So then we looked at, okay, what are the things that we really want, right? So performance became a problem. We evolved the performance. We got faster by clock cycles. We added instructions, but still we were not fast enough. So more performance for not too much area cost. These Falcon processors are actually really very small. It's not that big a deal, but we didn't really want to go too much more than by 2x. We want cache support, obviously, right? If you have big pieces of software, this is one of the reasons the software guys hated us. We forced them to do memory overlays, right? So if they wanted to call a procedure, then they first have to know that procedure from the main memory into the tightly coupled memory, and then they could execute it, right? It became a real pain. 64-bit addresses, and just suitable for modern OSs where we have some more options for virtualization, protection of different users against each other, this kind of stuff. We looked at about every architecture that was available. Actually, RISC-V was only considered very late because we just didn't know about it. We also considered doing our own design again, right? So that had been very successful. And frankly, I personally never wanted to give up the control because of the experience we had before with Tensilica, knowing that our flows are just not very standard and our interfaces are not standard, right? So I didn't really want to give up control because I thought I'm going to get something that's pre-baked, it won't fit in our design, and we're going to have all this trouble again. So eventually somebody said, hey, did you guys hear about this thing in Berkeley, RISC-V? They're apparently going to open source it, and so we decided to look at it. And when we did, we found out that that was really perfect match for us. We looked at the RISC-V rocket. Was not completely what we wanted, and one of the big things that you don't see here, it was written in chisel, which we don't like. Sorry, but not because we don't like chisel, but just because it doesn't fit in our flows, right? It's nothing to do with the chisel itself, but it wouldn't fit in our flows. And there were a few small things that we probably could have fixed on or added to the rocket, but the most important reason to make our own version was that we wanted a standard Verilog design, which just fits our design flow on there. I'm comparing here with 3 arms, just because, not because we don't like ARM, we actually do like ARM, we have a lot of ARM in our design. And so it would have been the natural choice had we gone outside at something else. So, and there's a presentation by Joe Shee that I'm referring to here. He talks a lot more about all the evaluations we did and how we came to this conclusion. So it actually was kind of a little bit well, let me talk first about this, the scalability. So this is something that I actually only started appreciating after the fact, after we chose RISC-V. Our Falcon was like a monolithic design. It wasn't really something that had a lot of flexibility. And if you remember how it started, right, you can kind of understand, right? We were looking for something simple, we made something simple. We didn't really think too much about the ISA. I think we probably took Dave's book about RISC and said, okay, this is kind of what you need in a RISC architecture, and we just implemented it. But this monolithic design has been bothering us over the years. We had to add instructions, make changes to the ISA, and it was never backward compatible. It was not really feasible to keep it backward compatible, not in a simple way. And as a result, we had to kind of recompile the software every generation. We were kind of maintaining double versions of the Falcon, and it just became difficult. Also, there were people said, hey, can you add floating point to it? And then we said, well, if we do that for you, we need to do it for everybody. It's going to be very expensive if we need to do it for everybody. So the flexibility in RISC-V, where you can have a lot of different variations, but keep it very clean, right? You know exactly what you're building. The old versions will remain the same, they don't change. This is something that I started appreciating recently, and I kind of wanted to highlight that because I don't think we talked about this before. But it's actually looking at the amount of different designs that we have, right? It's very important. It will also allow us to do designs that we maybe wouldn't have done with RISC-V if it didn't have this flexibility. For example, if we want something very, very small, right, we may have said, well, Falcon is too big for this, right? But now we can make like the compact version or the embedded version, right? That will give us scalability at the lower end of the spectrum. On the higher end, we develop quite big CPUs as well. If you look at our Tegra chips, right, we build big 64-bit ARMs. Falcon we would have never thought about, oh, let's use the Falcon ISA to build something like this. It becomes at least an option with RISC-V, with the scalability it has, right? So we also start to have a lot more flexibility to build RISC-V processors at the high end. So I think this will open up a lot of new opportunities for us down the road. Then the next question, of course, immediately became, hey, wait, this is something we're not really familiar with, right? This is not our design, but it's also not somebody else's design. It's kind of this open sourcing, right? How do we feel about this open source? Is that really a way that we want to go? So we thought about where does it matter, right? So one of the things is the control, right? So I talked about it. I really wanted to keep control over the architecture or over the designs at least. And this allows us to do whatever we want, right? So we have full control, right? We haven't given up anything in terms of control. It's not like other companies say, oh, you cannot, you are not allowed to do things, but they don't give you the architecture to change, right? So you don't have a real option to take an ARM core and say, well, I'm going to turn it into something different that is better for me, right? You get what you get. With RISC-V and the open source, we keep full control. On the quality side, we actually feel that the open source gives a lot of checks and balances that you wouldn't have if you do the design with your own small team or actually one company, right? So we get the best people in academia looking at the architecture. We get a lot of feedback from people in the industry about the architecture. So I think longer term, you'll see that the quality of RISC-V surpasses the quality of the ISAs that we could have gotten from somebody else or do ourselves. On the cost side, obviously you don't pay any license costs, you don't pay royalty fees, that's good, right? That wasn't the most important thing, but to use an open source architecture, but it's good to have. If you develop everything, the development cost, you need to think about everything. Right now, using RISC-V, a lot of things are basically already thought out in a thorough way, and we can focus on the things that we really care about. So, after thinking a little bit about it, using an open source architecture made a lot of sense for us. So we are happy with taking everything that we can take, but why would we also contribute? Well, I bring that back to my own heritage. I'm from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands we need to get the land from the sea because most of the land is below sea level. And we have what is called the polder model, which is usually, polders are the reclaimed land from the sea. And the polders have been, we've done that since the Middle Ages. And at that time there wasn't like a real central government. So what happened is people had to decide themselves, hey, we're going to make a polder, right? And there was nobody telling them to do it, but they had to agree. And even, there was like, oftentimes there were like fights between different villages, right? One wanted to have yellow tulips, the other one red tulips, but so they were fighting, but together they had to cooperate to keep the dikes, the channels in place, otherwise the land would submerge, right? So they had to cooperate despite differences. And RISC-V, by contributing to it, right, you could say, well, you're helping your competitors, right? Why would you do that, right? Because your competitor can just take whatever RISC-V does, right, and they'll be fine, right? So they don't pay the money, you do, right? So you lose, right? Well, I think that's actually wrong thinking. First of all, the polders would submerge, the land would submerge, and everybody thought like that. So everybody will benefit if we all work together. So that's a good thing. The other thing is we can influence the direction of RISC-V, right? So not in a bad way, right? It's not like, oh, that big company trying to influence an open source organization, but we can think about the areas that are important to us, right? So, and I'm going to talk about two of those areas, the memory model and the security. Those are two things that we feel really, really passionate about, and we said, well, that's right. So the security workgroup, for example, I'm not sure it would have existed if we hadn't said, hey, security is one of the things we really need to address early on because that's really, really important. So the workgroup was created. A memory model is something that we also care a lot about, and we decided to chair the workgroup. And so in this way, the ways that benefit us also benefit RISC-V, right? So it's a two-way street. Coming to the memory model, Daniel Lustig from the research team he's chairing the work group. We'll have a presentation tomorrow. I'm just going to give a little bit introduction to what it's going to be about. And he also has a work group meeting on Thursday. And why do we care? Well, if you look at our Tegra chip, this is the Jetson TX2. There's like 20 CPU cores there. If you look in the left upper corner, there's going to be 2 clusters. I have to use it, otherwise the video won't hear me. Yeah. So we have 2 clusters of CPUs over there. We have a lot of CPUs, a lot of the Falcons. Falcons we never talk about. It's just somewhere internal in the engines. But there's over 20 CPUs over here, and there's like 256 GPU cores. And they all have to work together in some way. And unless we decide how they work together and we define that clearly, right, we have a big problem in NVIDIA, right? So we need to make sure that that works. There's also a lot of snooping going on. There's things that are coherent, I/O coherent. There's things that are not coherent. The whole bus topology, as you can see, is a big disaster. So without a clear definition, we're going to be in trouble. That's why we care. The problem, right, memory seems so boring, right? I thought it was boring until Daniel started talking to me about it. And what is the problem? This is the most technical slide that I have, together with the next one. So if you have 2 cores, both have an address. The one is they both have 1, right? They load the value to an internal variable, right? And then they store it, right? And so if you look at the sequence here, you would say, well, you can end up with 0 and 1 in X or Y, right? But it could be, for example, let's say that core 0 goes first, right? So it does a load of X, right? A store of 0 in B, right? And then core 1 starts, right? That loads B, right? So I would be 0, Y would be 0, right? That seems to make sense, right? And the same way, if core 1 goes first, I can get X to be 0, right? But it is very obvious you cannot have X become 0 and Y become 0, right? Because that's just not how it works, right? If you no matter what order you follow, right, one of them has to be 1. And that's what I thought, but then Daniel told me, no, that's not how it works. Look at this example. Right, so I have these 2 cores, and the load and stores are actually in separate queues. There's some snooping going on between these queues for a single core, but not between the cores, which means that the load and store can actually be executed in the different order than what you expected. And because they follow independent paths, you can actually end up with 0 in both X and Y. So that's very surprising, and it would throw off software very likely, right? It's like now certain things that you were taught you can count on don't work anymore. And that's the problem, right? So you need to be very careful with your design, and the definition has to be very careful. Should we worry about it? Well, if you have 2 independent engines that go through a big network, right, you probably don't worry about it, and you just say, well, I do some other way of synchronizing, right? I use cache flush and cache invalidate here, and then everything will be fine, and that's true. But if you have like a multi-core CPU that where the threads are much more interconnected, it's not so clear that you can actually just allow these unnatural sequences of events to happen, right? And you may have to prevent that. And that's what the memory model work is all about, right? And I'm not going to give any solution here. First of all, because I've told this to Daniel many times, this is way too difficult for me. It's like I can't follow it, right? And second, I think that's not just one solution, there's many solutions, and different architectures have actually taken different choices. There are also, a lot of the architectures are very vague about it, right? Because it is so complicated and it is not so trivial. And RISC-V, like if you're ARM, right, and you build most cores yourself, you can probably deal with it. If you're RISC-V, you define an architecture and many people will build cores, and they could make different choices, right? It doesn't work anymore. If you take two different cores, one coming from Berkeley, one coming from Princeton, right, something like that, right, they don't talk to each other anymore unless you have defined how they talk to each other. So we need to define this. There's also a lot of it's very important there's a performance versus ease of use problem here, right? Being very aggressive in doing things out of order typically helps for performance, but it makes the use cases very difficult. It makes it difficult for software, and so we have to make smart choices in doing this. And the memory model team is trying to make those smart choices for us. The second place where we contribute is security. Joe is sharing the workgroup. You probably see him walking around here. You think, oh, this is one of the students of Falcon University. No, he is a manager and has 10 plus years of experience in doing CPU design. So he's not as young as he looks. There will be a work group meeting on Thursday about for security. So why is it important to NVIDIA? And these are just two examples. To be honest, security is getting so important for us. It's in every single market that we do, it's important. But two of the recent products with NVIDIA in it were the Nintendo Switch, right? And which is a gaming platform, obviously. And in the gaming industry, there's like as many games get downloaded, pirated, as that they get bought. So it's a big problem for companies like Nintendo to keep their content secure, and so that's one of the areas where it works, where we need security. Another area is Tesla. We've been talking a lot about automotive lately, and we're working with Tesla. And Tesla was hacked last year by Tencent, I think, which is a Chinese company, and they showed that they could actually remotely control Tesla cars, right? They could actually do things like even like braking remotely, which is obviously a big problem as well, right? It opens up a lot of possibilities for crime or even terrorism, right? And so we need to make sure that our cars cannot be hacked, right? So there's many other areas, but overall security has become extremely important for us. And the problem here, if you think about a car, right? If my car is like how old now, 10, 12 years or so, and the most electronics that I know about that's in there is a radio and a CD player, and there's no Wi-Fi with it, so it's like I just need to push the buttons. It's very simple. If you look at a modern car with a lot of features, there's electronics everywhere, and the electronics is getting more and more open as well, right? There's ways that you can get in it. There's Wi-Fi, all kind of ways. One funny example is the self-driving cars of Uber, right? So somebody gets a self-driving Uber car, he's even physically in there, not even just electronically, he's physically in the car, and he could put something bad in a car, right? A program, right? So the things like carjacking become very different, right? Instead of somebody coming with a pistol, right, they use a remote control and they carjack the car. So it becomes a very open system with a huge attack surface, right? Meaning you can get into the electronics in very many different ways. All the electronics is connected to each other, right? There's a single car computer, if you want, in the car that controls everything from your radio to the brakes, right? It's so by choosing the wrong radio channel, you may get your brakes broken, right? So and the consequences obviously are getting more and more severe, right? It's because everything is controlled by electronics, right? You can do almost everything with the car. That definitely wasn't possible in the past. So what do we want to do about it? This is the current proposal from the security team. So they want to add a number of trust levels, where the idea here is that you reduce the attack surface, especially for the trusted code. Make that very hard to. Nobody can write huge amounts of software bug-free, right? But if it's a smaller amount, you can actually keep it bug-free. And in this way, the trusted level controls the second level of trusted level, right? And then there's a non-secure level. And the way you can actually make sure that nothing bad ever happens, because there's controls, monitors in place that don't let things get out of hand. There was a question from Dave this morning, how does this connect to the privilege levels? And there is some connection, I think mostly on the physical memory protection side. But what we foresee is that we'll have some cores completely running in trusted level. So they're completely trusted cores called security enclave, right? And that's kind of the main root of trust in the whole system. And then there's other engines that have some level of security at the operating system level, for example, but there's more user level applications that don't have to be really trusted, right? And they just don't have the option to mess up things too much, right? They just do simple calculations, but they wouldn't control your brakes, right? But there's no reason why your radio should be a trusted program, right? It's as long as you know it can't hit the brake, right? And it's the radio can be a rich application, right? Big pieces of software, not necessarily controlled by, for example, the car manufacturer, right? It's like you want that openness, right? It's you want to be able to download your own radio program, right? Why would you want to do the radio program somebody else? And when I say radio program, I mean the way it looks, for example, right? The way you switch between channels. Maybe you want a voice control, so you download a voice controlled radio program, right? There's many things that you want to be open, but not your brakes, right? You don't want anybody to program your brakes. So that's what security is about. I would like to mention Richard Buell, who's contributing as well. He gave an excellent presentation in a workshop in Nuremberg, and I didn't have a reference to it that is can easily be found on the internet, but this is what I have. I'll try to see if I can find something that we can open up. I have the presentation myself, but I don't have I don't have a link. So that's about security. So this is why we care about it, how we're trying to contribute, and so the final thoughts. So we will use RISC-V in many products, basically everywhere. We are contributing, not because we're a charitable organization, we're not. We don't think we are throwing away our money by contributing to RISC-V. And I would say to the gentleman this morning, you should go work for another company. So we feel we actually get a lot of value out of RISC-V. We contribute because we think it aligns with our interests. It's not something because we are for any other reason, right? It's a lot of good people too. We do like that. There's a selfish interest, and we think you should contribute as well if you can. Look at the areas that you feel passionate about, right? And take the initiative, right? Start a work group, contribute to a work group, and think about how it can benefit you, right? It's don't do it for charity. I don't think that will work in the end, but do it because it helps you.
We have questions for Frans? You yell the answer.
Alice Wang, Media Tech. So when do you think your first RISC-V paper will be?
This year, end of this year. That's the first one. It will be production next year.
You've been from SJPU, so you talked about TEE, which is another level of to run the trusting code, right? But last year, several TEEs are also got compromised. So
right. Well, of course, we will do it right, and that's why we're putting it in open source, and everybody can make sure that there's no way to. Some things may be compromised at some point, right? There's no way around it. Joe would be better to answer it. The thing you try to do is you try to create isolation, right? So that even if something becomes compromised, right, then you'll still have a lot of things that don't get compromised. The way you can do it is make your main trusted piece of hardware and software small, right? So create a small surface of attack, right? And then work around it, and then have isolation between everything that's built on top of that, so that even if one branch is compromised, the other branches are not compromised. I'm never going to say that even secure systems cannot be broken. I've been working on security for a long time, and we've seen pretty crazy stuff. How people attack us, right? We've been very we have thought like differential power attacks, for example, right? Where people at a key exchange, they kind of measure the power, and they can see the difference between a 0 and 1, even in a very big chip, right? As long as you keep gathering the statistics, at some point you figure out whether the key had a 0 or a 1 there. And so yes, everything can be broken in the long term, and maybe I shouldn't say that, but you're sitting next to Sean, he knows everything about it. So it's everything can be broken eventually, but we try to make it very, very difficult. And we have been pretty successful at making it difficult, I think. It is a constant battle. the attacks get more and more sophisticated. We make our hardware more and more sophisticated, and it's just an arms race.
Hi, it's Michael Callier from Samsung. At the start of your slides, you mentioned that you looked at various ARM processors, and the reason you discounted ARM was not royalty costs. So presumably there were some technical reasons. It wasn't immediately obvious from that table what those were. So could you elaborate on what technical reasons you selected RISC-V over ARM?
Yeah, the main reasons, as I said, it's not like ARM is a bad call, right? It's some of it is like some of the versions were too expensive for us. We felt that they expensive in the sense of area. Yeah, you actually add a license cost to that, so it's total cost of ownership. Others were not, it wasn't so much the expensiveness, but the level of control we have. For example, security. The level of security that we have in our Falcons, I believe, is higher than what we could get from ARM. That's my personal opinion. But that would be another reason. The fact that we just can't control it. We can't say, oh, you know what, we take ARM and we're just going to add security to it. That's not possible. Right? With RISC-V that is possible. So these are the kind of things that made us not choose an ARM. It's not that the instruction set is bad, right? But from ARM you buy a hardware core, or you buy the instruction set. You get the instruction set.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. Your answer to the first question is the product of NVIDIA will be released this year. So what kind of product is this? Is this for the IoT field or is it for high-end devices? This is the first one. The second one is, what do you think about this RISC-V? Is it ready for NVIDIA to use RISC-V to make their own design targeting high-end devices? Like, is it possible for us to buy Tegra X3 or X4 and we see there's RISC-V design instead of ARM design or Denver design?
Yeah, that's a good question. To the first question, the first product that we happens to be a discrete GPU that uses RISC-V, but that's kind of coincidence. It'll go into every product. The second question, that's a very difficult one. I think there will be a lot of different opinions in NVIDIA. Well, no, let me say it like that. I don't think there will be different opinions. For now, I don't think that RISC-V as an ecosystem is already far enough for us to replace ARM. Whether that will be something that we consider in the future is I don't know yet. If you ask me personally, as a person, not as an NVIDIA employee, but as a RISC-V board member, definitely. I don't know yet. What I can see is that that option technically starts to exist, and this is kind of what I was trying to say about the scalability. With Falcon, I would never have said, oh, we're going to replace the ARM instruction set with a Falcon instruction set for the higher end CPU like the Denver. Right? But if I look at RISC-V as an architecture, I don't really see a big reason why that would technically not be possible. Now that could be very different reasons that are more like have to do with business or the ecosystem around the architecture that I think come into play, and that's I think going to be the bigger question than is it technically possible. It's a little bit vague answer, but it's as good as I have.
That's not a bad answer.
Hi, Ruslan Buke, University of Cambridge. You said that you are looking for a Falcon replacement that can run modern OS. What the modern OS you run on these chips? And is it general purpose OS? Do you use all the three privilege levels, RISC-V products?
I couldn't hear the first question.
What OSs are you running?
What OSs? Today we are just running a real-time operating system. It's one that we forget what it is. What's the name? Sean, do you remember? Operating system you run? Yeah. Free afterwards, yeah. Or version of it. We in the future, so we don't have at this moment. If you look at Falcon, the Falcon applications, we don't have a need for a very sophisticated operating system, but we do need something like some operating systems. The privilege levels we will start using, and as I said, it's just starting to grow. This started off as a very simple processor, and every generation it gets more and more complicated. I talked about, for example, security stacks that are being ported. There's also a desire from our own software team. They support, for example, Linux and Microsoft, and these kind of operating systems have very different ways that they do drivers, for example. The driver model is very different, which means that a lot of the work that we do on the software is actually done double, or actually we support more than 2 operating systems, so multiple times. And if they could move some of the lower levels of the operating system into the GPU, then you would only have to do it once. And so that's another place where software is moving into the GPU, and in this case into RISC-V kind of processors. So we just see that the demand is getting more and more, and part of the reasons why we don't run Unix or so on Falcon is because we don't have enough hardware support to run it, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're changing.
All right. Excellent. Great talk. Thank you, Frans.